the Farmland Exchange, the official podcast of CLHbid.com. Expert insights on buying and selling farmland in Western Canada.
Welcome back to the Farmland Exchange, the official podcast of CLHbid.com, where we provide expert insights on the process of selling and buying farmland across Western Canada. I'm Devon Davidson, digital media strategist and host of this podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about marketing and drones and technology in farmland sales. We're going to touch on photography, aviation, and a few other things along the way. So joining me on today's podcast, welcoming back Roy Carter, CEO at CLHbid.com. Roy, how are you?
Great. Thanks, Devon.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And then making his first appearance on the show, Mike Reeve, media producer. I think is
that's
your title
right.
there. Yeah. So thanks for being here, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Devon. I've always been on the other side of the podcast recording you, and now I'm under the hot seat, but it's glad to be here. It's lots to talk about.
It's good to have you here. Before we dive into whatever we're going to get into today, maybe just let our listeners know a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from.
Yeah, so born and raised right here in the Peace Country. Roy and I's history go back a long ways, and we've known each other. I've been fortunate to call you a friend for a really long time, and when this idea of CLHbid came up, he kind of reached out, being that I was a Peace Country boy, and we'd worked on some media productions in the past and that sort of thing. So it was really cool to see this idea from inception to where we are today, recording this podcast here at the Centennial Carter Farm. I want to point that out, that we're in the studio here. Allie was gracious enough to lend us her tack horn, which works out really good for a portable studio here for this podcast. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, you've been involved basically from day one. Maybe talk about that a little bit, how Roy approached you and
So maybe I'll interject there, but he said he joined the team because he's a local boy or Peace Country. Not really. I mean, we hooked up because he's a world-class videographer and been to Chile and around the world, New Zealand doing videography, sometimes extreme videography. One of the best in the world, certainly as far as sledding. So that's really, we knew we wanted to go to a different level as far as marketing if we were going to get into space. So definitely it wasn't a case of hiring a local kid, it was hiring the best, right? You go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Roy. So taking us back a couple of decades now, I went to college, got a business degree, and ended up pursuing my passion, which was filmmaking, and started a filmmaking production company here in the Peace Country. And that passion took me into extreme sports, like Roy was talking about, mainly snowmobiling.
Yep.
So, and that's taken me around the world. And then jet boat racing has been a big part of that too. And that's taken me down to New Zealand a number of times, and Australia in different areas. And it's been a pile of fun. And then taking all that knowledge of the production work that I've gained over the few decades of doing that professionally, to bring that to CLHbid was like so much fun because it was a new challenge. Roy said he always wanted to do stuff at a higher level. And I think we see that at CLHbid, everything's done at this like really well-to-do level. And that's, I think, that's what people deserve when it comes to selling the farm. And, they've got generations of history into this farm. So it's like, we want to do it right.
Yep.
And when Roy Carter tells you that, then you kind of get the green light to get creative and you put your best foot forward. And I think that's what we did with bringing all that knowledge of production work to it. And it was pretty cool because it did shake up the industry a little bit off the bat, I think. Hey, Roy?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, from your point of view, it's not as exciting as hanging off a skid in a helicopter with a bungee cord on your back, shooting riverboats doing 120. So I do appreciate that. And a big deal, though, I think your background grounded. You also worked in the patch. You get it. You can go to farms and, we get great feedback. It's like, talking to Mike about cars and, Mike's racing background and stuff. So, that's just, you just don't send anybody with a drone to a farm and kind of hit it off because, again, it's their life. It's everything to them. And they got to feel totally comfortable with the whole team. And so appreciate that, how you work with farmers.
I appreciate that, Roy. And when Roy alludes to some of the other production work that I've done, other listeners might have seen it, but like companies like SledNex or 509, I've been producing with them for over 15 years now. So that's, in the winter world, which is a ton of fun. And again, it's just bringing that expertise of like, how do you film that sort of stuff? How do you make it entertaining? How do you make it worth watching? And then bringing that over and Roy mentioned the jet boat stuff, and we probably shouldn't get on too much of a tangent here.
No, this is good.
Listeners want to hear more about the farmland and what we do with drones, but the riverboating stuff is a lot of fun. The technology that they have in there and how we're having to capture that, like Roy said, underestimating 160 mile an hour riverboats, flying up and down, and we're filming them from traditional helicopters.
Yeah.
The only reason we're not using drones in the current technology in that market is just because the drones don't have the distance, to keep up with some of the boats.
Yeah.
But it's a ton of fun to, again, take all that production work and apply it here to CLH.
Absolutely. Well, so changing gears, like for you, that's a big difference, going at that speed to now you're filming farmland.
Roy wasn't kidding when he said, how does it go from like a stationary big object, like a 3,200 acre farm to, a 3,200 horsepower jet boat going up and down the river. But it is it's a similar challenge in like, how do you best portray that to the audience?
Yeah.
You have a totally different audience there, sure. But I think people appreciate like what they're watching is going to be something worth watching. And I think like whether it's a piece of dirt on the ground, like some people can just walk over and not think anything of it. That dirt means a lot to a lot of people, and there's a lot of history there. And it's like, how do you pull that out? How do you tell that story?
Yeah.
What's the history there? What is that dirt scene? If that dirt could talk, like I want to share those stories with locals or potential buyers of that land and say like, why is this so substantial to them?
So let's maybe peel the onion back a little bit there. Let's talk about your process when it comes to the dirt telling a story. How do you get into that?
Yeah, and I think it maybe wasn't like 100% natural for me to like approach the productions the way we do, but I have to hand it off to Roy. It was just like, he was the one that maybe paved the way and allowed me to see that. And then as the other team members in CLHbid grew over the years, it's just like, man, these people have a real ability to value that land, to see that story, to really give it justice for what its value is. And that's talking to the parents, the grandparents, whoever the current tenant is or whoever. And it's just like, it's very interesting to do that. And that's because of Roy and his vision to begin with, really paying dues to what that land is. And Roy, you're like a third generation farmer as it is, so you can attest to that personally.
Yeah, but I mean, you've been amazing there as far as Mike even gives great feedback now to the script writers.
Yeah.
We're going into our 9th year, but at the start, Mike and I would do quite a bit of road trips together. And, some amazing times together.
Oh, yeah.
I still recall we were selling a ranch down close to Sweetgrass, Montana on the Canadian side. And
I don't know if we have enough podcast length for this story.
I got
the owner of the ranch, we left Milk River, and he didn't like my driving, so he told Mike once we got to his ranch that Roy was not to drive back and Mike was going to drive. He didn't know Mike was a race car driver.
I believe he agreed to the sale. Yep. Okay, CLH, you guys can sell my land only if he drives it back and Roy, you sit in the back of the truck.
Oh, yeah. No.
We were on a mission.
We're kind of jumping around, but that Richard, we were talking to him and Mike got out to drone. And again, the respect. Mike's asking him about the farm and he gives that to the script writers and that. And he was telling us about his girls. And he had 3 girls who were now about 45 or whatever.
Yeah.
And Mike's out droning and it was a skiff of snow.
Yep.
And the farmyard was, nobody was living there anymore. Everybody left. And he was living in town with his wife in Milk River. But anyway, I was saying, so Richard, when you look at that yard, you see 3 little girls running around, eh? And it was quiet, and I looked over, and there was tears coming down his cheeks. And he just said, Roy, if we're going to get this sold, you got to quit talking like that, right? And two deals to get the deal was one I couldn't drive back, and the other one, he wouldn't let us put up any signs. He just said, I can't deal with signs right now. The big part of it at the end of it was Mike's videography telling the story about the farm, and they've got that as a keepsake, right?
Yeah, you talk about that Sweetgrass area, and like you ask a videographer, hey, can you make this look at skiff of snow like you mentioned? So it was, November, December time of year. So we're dealing with weather, and we'll talk about that a little bit more because it isn't like the perfect time to sell, to go out and drone the farm, but there also isn't a really bad time either. And today or right now could be the perfect time.
Yep.
But anyway, going out there and seeing the Sweetgrass Mountains, and the hills in the background, a skiff of snow, little stubble sticking up. We still use some of that footage to this day on some of our marketing material. And what I'm getting at is just like, that was Sweetgrass, but then there's Chilliwack, and then there's, Manitoba and what it has to offer around Winnipeg. And it's just like, I consider myself extremely fortunate to be able to see intimately all these nooks and crannies throughout Western Canada. Like, it's a real dream to fly your drone through some of these areas and to be able to see it, you know, whether it's you got a combine and harvest or, you know, you're seeding in the spring or like, there's so much beauty out there. And it's just like a filmmaker's dream really to be able to see all this and capture it all.
It's a real privilege, honestly. And I can say that a little bit, right? I've only been here for a year now, roughly, but just for me to be able to get to some of these areas to go and fly my drone in places I never thought I would, right? Out in BC, you know, in the mountains and stuff. It's like, I never had envisioned this for my profession. And sometimes my wife likes to joke that I get paid to take pictures of fields, but you know, it's like, that is part of it, but I mean, it's a lot of fun, right?
Well, and I'm glad we're talking about this and we have a long format to get into some more of the detail, because it's like, from the outside looking in, it's just like, oh, you film farmland. Oh, that must be pretty boring. Well, you don't get to meet the people. You don't get to hear the stories. You don't get to like understand what that means to a whole third generation family. Sit at the kitchen table with them, which is a huge privilege. Like, I get to do that, and I get to see and hear these stories. And it's just like, okay, now press the green light and try and go out there and you capture this to what the stories they were saying. Like, and in a short format, people are busy these days. We try and get it online. We're trying to advertise this. And it's just like, how do you capture all these elements of this realm of this, you know, 100-year-old farm in this short 10-minute video, you know? And
it's tough to capture all the nuance, right, of that sale.
We sold for a fellow 4 or 5 years ago. He'd never seen his farm from the air. And unbelievable. It's stuff we take for granted. But we took him the laptop, Bridget and I, of Mike's video production with the script and the voiceover and that. And he just wanted to know the button to hit for replay all the time. And he must have watched it 10 times before he'd talked to us.
Wow.
And he'd never, ever seen it from the air. And it was time to leave. And he'd got a place in town, but just awestruck with it, right?
How important, Roy or Mike, you know, is it for potential buyers to see that film, to see that piece of property from the air?
I think we've seen a big shift in even, you know, going on 9 years in my time here of like, there's potential bidders or buyers that don't even necessarily need to walk that land anymore because of the technology and what we're providing them. Like high-res stills, you know, all the information written out, a nice video of it, and then the whole legal team to, you know, do the due diligence in the behind the scenes of actually like writing everything out and, you know, explaining it really well is just like, that's really interesting to watch that happen, you know, where technology is really providing them that, like, I guess it's just like a security blanket essentially from, doesn't matter if you're downtown Calgary and Winnipeg looking at, you know, land in BC, it's like you kind of get all the nitty gritty of that for sure.
So sorry, Devon.
No, I was just going to ask you, Roy. Sorry to cut you off, but how have you seen that shift then over time? Like, has it opened up a market that you maybe didn't think was possible 10 years ago?
You know, when we went, you know, 10, 11 years ago to build CLHbid, we didn't see list working. We didn't see tender working. We didn't see auction working. You know, auction was often a map with a yellow marker as to the squares that are being sold.
Right.
And they were just squares, often like an appraisal will have, right? And we knew if we were going to get into it, we wanted to take it to a different level. So Mike had the vision of script writers, voice actors. I mean, we had a lady a few years ago that said, you can sell my farm, but only if I have that guy's voice. And it was like, yeah, you can have that guy's voice. And but Mike's put that all together. But we sold a ranch probably 3 years ago, and it went exceptionally well. It sold sort of outside of the local area. And a couple of professionals bought it. And they called afterwards, and they were on a link call. They were in two different cities, but they were both in Alberta. And they said, she said, is there a house on that ranch? And it's like, really? You're asking me if there's a house on it? And there's no house. And then she said, well, my husband wants to talk to you. He was on the link call. And he said, would it be good for cattle? And it was like, yeah, it's a ranch, good moisture, lots of grass. And I said, like, you guys haven't looked at this, eh? And it was like $2.5 million. And they said, no, we haven't looked at it. We just saw the video. And I said, so what are you gonna come and look at it? And yeah, we're gonna go rent a helicopter. We'll fly up, rent a helicopter, go look at it. And I said, you guys been watching Yellowstone, eh? And they laughed. And it was like, yeah, we've been watching Yellowstone. Unbelievable, eh?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, not all sales go that way, but
No.
some
But
buyers
that's
are
an
in that
example
position,
of, literally for people like that, Mike can capture that better than walking 3 miles across pasture, right?
Yeah, and even if you do walk the land, the perspective that the drones give from the air, it can highlight things that you didn't even know were there. Sometimes even farmers didn't even really see it from that perspective themselves in the last 50 years of being there. So it is really interesting to give that perspective and, to be able to have someone walk the land without even having to be there. It's a game changer for sure.
And Mike understands light, and
Yes.
you'd go to the farm at the right time of day. I mean, we've all driven on a paved highway or at really low light, just before dark. You can see ruts in the road, in the pavement, right down the middle, and that's not really what the road looks like, but it does at that certain light level where it's coming straight across, right? Yep. And that's where, Michael, I know you're conscious of all that stuff, hitting it at the right light and doing it right.
Yeah, you don't often think when you watch the end product, why the voice artist highlights that or why you flew that direction or, it looks so seamless. And that's when you got a decent operator behind the camera. It's just like, you don't know they're there. You don't even think of that sort of stuff because it looks so natural. And that's when we know we're doing a good job, is when you don't even think about it.
Well, and I was going to say, the barrier to entry, a drone now, the cost is not that high anymore, but it's one thing to have a drone. It's another thing to have a good operator, someone who has an eye. We talk about Billy all the time as having, that eye, and Mike, you're very much the same, right? Very conscious of those details.
Yeah, the whole team. I mean, Amos, Billy, yourself, Devon. Yeah. It's really cool. We have to cover a big geographical area in Western Canada. All 4 provinces. It's a lot of farmland out there. So we're fortunate to have a really cool team. Yeah. And I'm very excited to get your guys' footage into the editing studio and be able to work the magic from the back end to actually put all this together with the script that's written and James's voice and then what you guys put out or myself or whatever drone. It's really cool to use technology for that advantage. So coming back to barrier to entry, you said like anyone can grab a drone. Sure. Is it cinematic? Well, I think that's the difference is like, why did you get into droning? And we've met so many people. We do work with other contractors as well. And it's just like, why did you get into droning? Well, the drones were there. I kind of like RCs and I've used them. Okay. So you don't have a photography or filming background and it is sometimes evident with drone operators. And I think a lot of people feel, I grabbed a drone, they're really cool. I could fly
do that.
it.
Sure. Yeah.
It's awesome. But drones to me, when I started in video production, it was standard definition, then went to high definition, then went to 4K. And throughout all that time, you're trying to get creative and you're trying to move the camera in such a way that you want the audience to go with the actor or whatever is transpiring through that film. For sure. With the drones, it opened up so many doors. And I can remember some stories. Early days of drones, octocopters, they were worth $120,000. We were down in Utah and we were using one, and it was more cumbersome to bring that drone up the mountain to do filming in the backcountry than it was to just hire a traditional helicopter. And I know we'll talk more about traditional helicopters because they've served a big purpose in filmmaking. But at that point, I'd probably logged 200 or 300 hours filming, like Roy said, with the door off and standing on the skid of a traditional helicopter, various sizes and capacities, and knew what they were capable of. And when drones started coming out, I was very excited because I was like, you could fly through, under trees and different areas where you're not going to put $1 million helicopter with people in it. So it was really exciting, but it had a learning curve to come like everything else with technology. And they were really cumbersome, really big, really expensive. The operators didn't really want to fly them in, dangerous, let's call it situations or whatever, low proximity. So it was really limiting. But thankfully, fast forward to when, Roy came up with the genius idea of creating CLHbid.com, drones had come to a point where we started actually using a traditional helicopter on some of our first jobs. Yeah. And, we're fortunate enough to have the experience knowing what they're capable of. We go out, we film these big ranches and things like that. But it would dawn on me. I was like, you know what, Roy, do you mind if I try using one of my newer drones to see if this would be adequate for it? And Roy had the trust in me. He said, which I was very fortunate for. And what that drone could do to show off that farmland was night and day. Yeah. It was, like you mentioned, like the cinematography of it to tell that story, to reveal those areas, to get down into like the subtle nuances of what that ranch in this case had to offer for farmers. It was pretty cool to see what it was able to do, because from a traditional helicopter, at least 1,000 feet above surface, and everything's looking pretty flat.
Yep.
You know, and you're trying to study it, you're trying to do all that, but the drones allow a little bit more intimacy to get down to that ground level. What does that soil look like? You know, what do the crops look like that summer?
It's
What
almost
does
like
that
they're
pasture
walking
look like?
through the field.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What does that fence line look like? A lot of times we're down next to the fence and we're showing
Yeah.
off what it looks like, and it's way more efficient to do that than you could never do it with a traditional helicopter.
Well, even just in terms of logistics, you know, now you've got to schedule a helicopter, you've got to, like, you know, all of it. It's just cost efficiency, all those things come into play, right?
Yeah.
Your editing, Mike, you know, I don't know. Like you say, everybody after the iPhone 2 is a photographer, right? Videographer, everything. You know, there's hardly any more SLRs or whatever out there, which is kind of my space. But the editing, I think, is 80% or more, right?
Yeah.
Putting that together, the way you put, you know, it together is unbelievable, right? And it just blows people away, buyers and sellers, right?
Yeah.
You know, sellers like the way you showcase their place. And again, we have Billy and Amos and out there. Generally, though, it goes to your desk for editing, which is takes it to that top level, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty proud to say that, you know, every project that we worked on from day one at CLH has come across my desk at one point or another. Like, it's a true, like, I'm truly grateful to have that opportunity to do it, because it's Farmland across Western Canada. They mean a ton to everyone. And, you know, the farmers that are selling these, it's huge. It's a part of their family. You know, it's like we're talking on some of the other podcasts, it's just like, it's a member of the family when they go to sell it, and we get it. We try and put our best foot forward every time. So the editing is just like, you get excited, you get jazzed up on it, because you want to get that to the sellers and say, like, here's your product, here's what we're selling. And a lot of times they turn around and they say, we don't want to sell it anymore, because they've fallen back in love with it.
Yeah, often it's, you know, maybe family that's moved to Calgary 30 years ago, and it's their old grandparents' place.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't sell it after listening to that.
It's like
right?
getting an old pickup detailed before you sell it. And you look at it again, you go, that doesn't actually look that bad. Maybe I won't sell it. Yeah.
No, I can say, Mike, I'm thoroughly impressed with how serious you take all of that. And the amount of requests that must come across your desk. I know how many requests I send to you for different formats and things, and you're always so quick about getting back. It's like, yeah, I need a 9 by 16, 15-second clip, and you're like, yeah, I'll get it. And 15 minutes later, here's Mike, and it's like, it's just done perfectly. So
yeah, that comes back to, again, technology. We're at the right place at the right time. Like CLHbid, you know, the concept of it in the marketplace today. Would it have worked 20 years ago when, you know, before iPhones were really prevalent, before people were out in the fields combining with an iPhone in their hand or looking at social media with, you know, high-speed data everywhere? It's the right place at the right time. And I think it was like a good synergy of, like, CLHbid was the right idea at the right time. I think any earlier, and it probably would have shook the market too much, that people didn't have confidence in the system. Yeah. But that and the technology that we can offer on the marketing side and how we're capturing these farms today couldn't have been done 20 years ago either at this capacity.
No, that's a great point, Mike, because it has changed on both sides, right? So you're looking at the technology we're using, but then the way that people are using technology while they're in the field. So GPS, and now they're driving down the field, they're scrolling their phones. And that's made the marketing more accessible for us as well to get that message out there.
Yeah.
So just quickly on drones, though, like how much has that changed, and what sort of challenges are we still facing in terms of, we talked about this yesterday, like cold weather drones, right? Like that's still not really a thing.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things to take into account. So I'm an advanced operator in Western Canada. You know, we got a variety of drones, everything from minis to, you know, traditional Mavics and Cinis, all the way up to Inspires and different things like that. So our drones ranged from 250 grams up to, you know, over 10 pounds in size, pretty large, you know, 4 feet diameter wingspans and things like this. So pretty impressive, pretty cool. And again, thanks to maybe Bridget and Roy, maybe more Bridget for green lighting all these concepts with the accountant, our CFO for green lighting all these, when we come to her and say, like, man, we got this idea for this new, you know, this will bring way more to our cinema side of things and showing off the farms. Can we do this? And I think the ownership group is always like really eager to really push. And again, it just comes back to, like, how can we tell that story better? How can we showcase that farm or ranch better for these farmers? And again, we get it. It's over 100 years old at some time. So it's just like, you can't just show up with an iPhone like Roy's talking about and pretend you're an editor. Like, no, you want to show these off well.
And buyers are busy, you know, on the smaller, you know, where they're investors and that often, I mean, they're busy and they want to see that in their boardroom or at home or whatever. You know, it's not uncommon on single quarters, maybe along a river or something, that, you know, there might be some rec interest. I know in one case, it was along a river, and a guy bought it, and I asked him about it, and it was like, "Where'd you see it?" And he said, "On my wife's Facebook last night."
Yeah.
And again, never looked at it, just bought it. And Mike, I recall another one on the Burnt River. A couple during that heat dome about 4 years ago. We went there, and they had no running water in their kind of summer cabin. And a couple, they were older couple sitting around the backside in the shade, holding hands on 2 lawn chairs.
Wow.
And Mike gets it. He took still photography of them afterwards, but he just nailed it. And the buyer there, he called me afterwards, and he was like, "Okay, when did you look at it?" And didn't, but I saw it, and we want it. And what's your story? And it's like, we build high rises in Vancouver, Italian family.
Yeah.
And that was Mike putting that together for that couple. And it was a game changer. They wanted to move away. They had to dream of getting enough money to move to BC. And it happened in large part because Mike had a package that could get into boardrooms in Vancouver, right?
Yeah.
And there's no way those people are catching a plane to go look at a quarter in northern Alberta, right?
No.
Thanks for bringing that up, Roy. I remember that day vividly. It was, again, Peace Country kids growing up and knowing Saddle Hills in that region, and you're always like, man, that is really cool land, whether you're hunting or snowmobiling or quadding or whatever. It's a really cool area. So you get the opportunity to go up there again. We talk about get to see these cool slivers of Western Canada. And that couple, like you mentioned, I got to spend the day with them, and passion. You talk about passion, how much they love that land, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that I want to mention on the podcast is, again, being lucky to be able to go out and see these farms. And we work with an amazing team that don't always get to go meet all the farmers and everything in person or go get to see the farm. So I consider myself extremely fortunate for that. But there's a lot of times where I try and grab pictures of the current owners, or the family members and send them back to the team. And that's huge. And then you always get feedback from the team members to say, thanks so much for sending the pictures of the people. They don't go public. It's not something that we're marketing, but it's for internal purposes for our team, because each and every one of the team members at CLH value that so much, and they get it. They know what it means, and the people behind it, right? And they love to see it. So you share those pictures, and the team's so thankful for that. It's cool to see that everyone shares that same passion.
Totally. Yeah, I was actually really impressed. That was one of the reasons I was so excited to join CLH. Was there's so many people that are just into photography and cinematography and all of these things. And so I wanted to touch on that, Roy, because I know photography is close to your heart. Maybe talk a little bit about how you got into that and just what it means to you.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Devon. I first really got into it through flying. I had on the farm, I had a Stinson tail dragger, so you got a high wing. So I used to kind of do as Christmas gifts. I'd go take pictures of farms, and just for clients of mine, friends, whatever, and started learning a bit of f-stop and stuff and like that.
Yeah.
And then ended up going on a fishing trip to Alaska with a good friend of mine, Nick Van Galen, a Dutch fellow that's got a big name in Red Angus. Anyway, he'd taken a photography class before we went to Alaska, and we came back and we met at a little pub in Grand Prairie, and he was showing me his pictures, and it was like, I got a picture of that same bear, but yours is way better, right? And it was, I didn't know f-stop at that time, and he was shooting at about 2.8.
Yeah.
So I like to learn, and went and took some courses, and it went from there. So got pretty serious into still photography, and that's actually how Mike and I met.
Okay.
Many years ago, probably just about 20 years ago.
Yeah. If not longer.
Yeah.
It's
Mike,
sad to say,
Mike,
probably
Dating
longer.
yourself, Mike. Yeah.
Mike was the big name for video, and then I wanted to learn a bit, and but we did some stuff together, and that's where we kind of hit it off. And from there, one of the other guys on the team, Amos Weeb, he's famous. Amos is on the internet, Amos. But world-renowned photographer in animal photography, northern lights, owls.
Yes.
And he's self-taught. He came to work on our farm when he was 13 years old. And he actually went to the glass post office, took a pail, stood on it, put his name up that he was looking for work because he was only about 3 feet high. And Nick, again, Van Galen, my friend, went in there, and it was like, oh, this Mennonite fellow must be 6 feet high, and I'll call him and see if he wants to go to work.
Big, strong guy.
And he went to pick him up, and this kid walked out, and he thought it was the guy's son, and it was Amos at 13. But anyway, it's Ellie, my daughter calls him a brother from another mother, but he he started doing some photography with me, and by 14, I would say he passed me.
Wow.
And he's passionate about reading and learning light and seeing light. So, even we won't take a home quarter if there's a big timber frame or something like that. It's not our space. But often he's really good at low light still photography. Yeah. He does, as a fair amount of good drone stuff. So again, we've got, like you say, Devon, so many on the team. Billy, who joined us a couple years ago or so.
Yeah.
Incredible eye and how she puts stuff together. It's just, we're lucky.
Yeah, she's shaking up the Instagram world. Everyone loves to see her reels. I think people are looking forward to that now, yeah.
A lot of good content from Billy, yeah. So if you're not following us on Instagram, make sure you do that.
Check out the Instagram feeds, because the reels are, they're next level.
Well, going back to Amos quickly, I remember you telling me a story, Roy, about Amos, how he wanted to learn more about it was strobe lighting or something, and you had a setup, and he basically just took it and learned it in an afternoon.
Oh, yeah. I used to go to Santa Fe, New Mexico once a year for a week and get immersed. And I would mostly it was professional photographers, but scare yourself. That's the best way to learn, right?
Yeah.
And I'd be, I hardly knew how to put my camera on manual, and they're all doing it, and I'd be just shaking. But by the end of the week, I'd definitely learn more than everybody else because I was at a lower level.
Right.
And so I would go and do strobe lights there and learn that, low light at night to kind of the editorial shot and that. And but it's tough. They shoot at about 1.5 thou, and then you got to leave the shutter open, and it's not easy. So anyway, Amos, I had all the gear. Yep. He comes to my office and says, "Where's all your strobe lights and stuff?" And I said, "In storage." And I'm going to go teach myself. And I was like, "Yeah, that's not happening."
Good luck.
And so he was like, "But you can go. Here's where they are." And I went down there, and then like 7 hours later, and he had remote triggers for the strobe lights and that, and he was shooting himself outside. And I started looking at it, and it was like he had it figured out. Right?
He got it, yeah.
And so that's something you can't send a kid to a puppy mill photography place and learn. They got to have that.
Yeah. And
like farmers understand that too. You got a talent at something. You're born with it.
Yeah.
He is just born with a good aptitude for photography and patience. And again, we got so much feedback from farmers. He's also our Class 1 driver for dropping vans along with Allie. And, they like that he's got the time of day for him. He can talk about crops. He knows farming inside out.
Yeah, he loves sitting in a combine and harvest.
Oh, yeah. No, he's
well versed. We could talk about, photography forever with Amos, but yeah.
Sure, yeah.
He Class 1, and he loves farming, and he's, huge on social media platforms for famous Amos. Like, he's so well versed. Yeah. It's a cool team.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What's just getting back into that discussion, Roy, about feedback from clients and stuff in terms of marketing. So I know you'd mentioned, what are some of the things that they've liked about what we're doing in terms of marketing, and maybe some of the areas where we've improved?
Yeah, when we started, we again spent a year and a half or so getting feedback from sellers as to what they wanted if we're going to build something just for farm and ranch. And that's the problem is, if you try and be Walmart and sell lake lots and lawnmowers and that, it all sort of gets lost, and you can't really focus on photography. Shooting a baler is quite different than somebody's ranch, right? So we listened there, and again, that's why we got Mike from the very first one. We wanted to come out of the shoot, at a fairly high level, and I think you kind of blew him away on our first sale. So, and then one thing they told us was, give us marketing at a level that sort of respects what we have, a lifetime of work, and maybe my grandparents' work and my grandfather's, or my dad's work. And they didn't see that with a Coroplast sign blown over in the ditch with a listing realtor.
Yeah.
And it was treated like a house in town, and it's not a house in town, right? It's like we talked about in an earlier podcast. It's like another person, right? Mm-hmm. And they wanted the respect that it was due. So, we listened to that. And, we went to our signage. I think we were 2 or 3 years before we could figure out a sign that would take the Cypress Hills winds. Yeah. But, when we figured out 1,500 pounds was too much for a block, 400 was not enough.
Right.
We use 800-pound blocks with, 3-inch steel pipe, and finally figured out the 4x4 material that'll take those winds. Yep. And it was a process, but farmers appreciated it, that you're really interested in showcasing it. And again, as coming from Saskatchewan, A lot of the roads aren't, quite a few of the RM roads and that aren't
They're
plowed in
not
the wintertime.
ideal.
So what's a sign on a quarter or a half or something going to do? Zero at some point.
Yeah.
So, we put signs in the area at key intersections with a, Kenworth tandem picker. And, it just drives people to the site. It says land for sale and with an arrow.
Yeah.
But we can tell if Amos goes out and puts up 6 signs around an area, farm for sale, we can tell by the hits on our website that night what's happening, right?
Yeah, and you see it immediately. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Or we'll get phone calls that afternoon.
Yeah. It's almost immediate.
We have one now down by Sylvan Lake, and we placed a 53-foot van. It's along the highway between Bentley and Sylvan.
Yeah.
He placed it late at night last week, and the phone was ringing by 8:30 the next morning.
Wow.
People driving down that highway, right? So it, again, it works. We've got, I think, over 50 now 53-foot vans. So if we have land for sale with high exposure along a highway, people like it. It's basically the marketing that they asked for, right?
And we talk about signs and, more traditional forms of media that people are familiar with in that region. But then I think the other thing that's been really cool to work with the team is like constantly pushing. We don't have all the answers you mentioned. We're, I think, on version 5 of our signs because we're constantly improving them, but we're taking feedback because we go into different areas in Western Canada, and you're right, huge winds down south, Pincher Creek area and stuff like that. But also on social media. So farmers, when you bring to them and say like, okay, we made this really cool video, and you show them on their laptop. Well, that's really cool. They want to show their friends, their neighbors, potential bidders, right? We take it one step further and expand that all over social media. We want to make sure that every potential bidder is present on sale day. So how do you ensure that all this Western Canadian audience can see this or potentially bid on it on sale day? And that's what the power of social media, again, coming back to the right place at the right time. And that's what, everything coming together to allow this. And the farmers don't have to know that, but they have to have the trust in CLHbid that we do know. So team like yourself, Devon, to bring that marketing powerhouse to them, grab that fantastic video that potentially you shot or Billy shot or Amos or whatever, and goes through the editing process, gets that great script. Well, we need the whole world to see that, right? And they deserve the whole world to see it on sale day.
No, they do. That's one thing is we want to make sure we bring, like you said, as many potential bidders to the table as possible. And I think we do a fantastic job of doing that as a team. I will say, Roy, just going back to the signs quickly, is those vans, that is the CLHbid.com signature.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, it's so many people recognize. I talk to people in Saskatchewan all the time and say, I've seen your vans here and here and here. And that's how I first heard about the company as well. So, it's really interesting. And just in terms of digital, Mike, it's changed so much too.
Huge.
It's changing constantly, new platforms all the time. But now we are on, I think, literally every social media platform that...
And should be, right? Like if you're selling a farm like that, like Roy mentioned, there's so much history there. It's like... You really have to put your best foot forward and make sure that it doesn't have to just be on a billboard at the local hall or anything like that. Like it should be worldwide, and it deserves to be. So,
it's a game changer for value at the end of the day for the seller.
Yeah.
We're not regional. We got into it knowing real estate tends to be regional, just the way they are. Mm-hmm. And, normally not licensed out of province and that. We knew we wanted to be across Western Canada. Yeah. There's these borders don't exist for farmers and ranchers looking to set a kit up.
Yeah.
And the land at Tisdale is as good as the stuff at Bentley. Bentley call it 1.6 or 1.5 a quarter. Mm-hmm. Tisdale is lighting it up now, but a few years ago, maybe 400 for the same land. Where are you going to set a kit up? You're not looking at that Saskatchewan border.
Yeah.
So you need to be across Western Canada. And we've got foreign ownership rules in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta that we totally respect and get. For some reason, they don't have them in BC. Mm-hmm. So, when we sell in BC, and we just sold the big ranch there that Mike was a big part of, I mean, you get people on from the States, from Australia, but it's all because of the videography and the packaging, right?
Yeah.
How about we talk about that project?
I was just going to say,
dive into
that. Yeah, I'd love to dive into that one.
So, we featured a pretty big, extensive ranch in central BC this summer, and Devon and I know we were talking about this podcast and leading up to it and things like that. And Devon, you were fortunate enough to see it, set boots on the ground there on a big marketing push that we did. I visited the ranch on 2 separate occasions. So we had video production crews arrive at that ranch on 3 separate occasions to make sure that we were at the right time of year, not to just show it off properly with nice fall colors, but then we were there at their branding. And, we were really immersed in what that ranch was accomplishing, which was, really high-end cattle at the time and, really showing off the land in a great way. So we arrived 3 different occasions, big crews, just to basically show it off on an international stage like Roy's talking about. And maybe people think, is that really necessary or whatever? But if it's your ranch, I think you'd be pretty happy, or I would be anyway,
absolutely.
myself, to see that CLH is, bringing that to the table for sure.
Yeah, and not just you and I. I mean, Roy was out there as well. And how many CEOs of a company are camping out somewhere? And
it was fun.
Roy wasn't just hanging out. He was out there with his camera. He's taking photos. He's running. That's the level that the team goes to, right?
But I think that's talk is fairly cheap. But we could sit there and say, oh yeah, we love ranching. No, we love ranching. We were presenting the opportunity to be at that ranch. Well, who wouldn't take that opportunity? And I think that's the difference is Allie was out there, Billy was out there, you were out there because we were presenting the opportunity. Hey, could you guys come out for a weekend, capture this, shoot it? Absolutely.
I loved
do I
it.
need more of an invite?
No,
absolutely.
It was crazy. When they said, do you want to come out? I said, yeah, I'll be there.
I like the day that I was there when Mike's friend that's a sled videographer and he also does stuff around the world.
We're talking about Josh, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
But he had this, it was like, if I'm going to get those cowboys and the horses, I got to be on a horse. And then somebody asked him, you ever been on a horse before? And I was like, no. And they threw him on a horse with all his video gear, and away he went.
And I'm not talking small video. It was a lot of cinema gear.
Yeah, it was
5-axis gimbal.
He had a $20,000 DJI Ronin,
it was hanging off of a horse.
Yes,
yeah, never been on a horse.
No,
and away he went, and he got some amazing footage, right?
Oh yeah.
But that's just having people that think out of the box, and
Well, that was a really cool experience for me, Roy, because it was so collaborative, right? Between Billy and Josh and myself and Allie and you, and it's we're all sitting here. We all have an interest in farming and ranching and photography, and we're just at the end of the night, we'd just be looking at footage. It's wow, that's a banger. It was yes, okay, great job, guys. And just a really quick funny story. I thought I was getting punked, Roy, I'll be honest. So I'm from Saskatoon, and I'm driving across Western Canada to this ranch, and Roy drops me a pin, and there was an accident. So of course I didn't get there in time. It got dark. And I'm driving in the middle of nowhere. There's absolutely zero light. I've never been here before. It's a ranch in the middle of BC. I'm kind of driving on this dirt road going through the valley, and
no cell service.
No cell service. Eventually, I see a light way off in the distance, and I'm like, I can't think that's where I should be going. And I wasn't driving really fast, but maybe not as fast as I should have been, because the next day I saw the drop-offs on each side of the road, and I went, I should have gone a little slower maybe. But I thought they were sending me to the middle of nowhere. I thought it was like an initiation thing. Roy was just punking me, but I got there anyway, and Roy was so welcoming, and I had a great experience. And thanks, Devon. The owners themselves too were so.
Totally.
Just helped us out. I mean,
they had raised kids there, and it was 3 different families kind of thing, the ranches, and again, it was probably like a few people. We talk a farm like being a person, but they all had houses on it. And the upper slope to that ranch, that valley, it just felt good. You just kind of felt like we were the only people in that valley, and kind of an hour and a half east of Whistler or something there, but a spectacular area.
Yeah.
One thing that was pretty cool for me was being at the branding of that ranch with Allie and Billy. Tyler was there, and to be able to spend some time with the sellers, and they had so much history there. So Roy, you talked about, it was really cool to spend some time with them and the kids. So the kids were about my age. We got along really well, but they were a little bit apprehensive at the start. We came in, we had our signs up. This is probably the 3rd and last time that we were going to be there to shoot some more relevant or recent content of the ranch. And they're very, they had their backs up for sure when we first arrived there.
Yeah.
Because they had spent the last decade at least growing up at that ranch, spending all their long weekends there. They had their families and now their kids there with them. And they didn't know what to think of us, but we spent the weekend with them. We were getting our hands dirty with the branding. We had the irons in the fire. We were doing everything with them, as well as trying to capture some footage, but really immersed into it. And at the end of it, we were all dirty and whatever. And they turned to us and said, you know what? We're happy you guys are selling this ranch for us because you guys get it. You want to be here. And that was like...
The respect was there, right?
Yeah. It was huge for me because, like, again, you look back at, like, you know, years and years ago when Roy initially came up with this concept, and what does it mean? You know, like, where do you go from here? How do you really justify it? How do you do all these things right to really ensure that these ranches, you know, get it? And if the owners are telling you that, and it means so much to them because it's a family member and they're losing it, that means a lot.
It had been listed by an international real estate firm for over a year before. Yes. But again, the owners then finally decided to take control and wanted to set exit date, right? Yeah. And, you know, again, it was an international firm, but again, the marketing was sort of typical. Here's the map, and here's the ranch, and here's the acres, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, Mike made a Yellowstone movie out of it, right?
Oh, it was incredible. Yeah. It's, and that makes my job so easy, Mike, honestly. As a digital media buyer, it's like, if I have great content to work with, the reach and the awareness and the engagement online is just so much more than it would ever be if we had sort of typical video content.
There's a few potential sellers that we come across or, you know, got to meet later on in CLH, and they said, like, I started getting onto your guys' YouTube channel and I couldn't turn away just because I liked watching every, you know, farm or ranch across Western Canada. It was kind of like drew them in for a bit. We've got our own, you know, channel that provides that sort of entertainment or content for farmers. But it's cool to hear that people, enjoy that high-end production.
They do. And it feels authentic too, right? Because we, like you said, we understand it, right? It's this is coming from a real place, and we get what's important.
Yeah, a lot of times we'll use the, you know, the owners of the ranch or farm in the productions themselves, whether they're on a combine or swath or, you know, they're out riding horseback or whatever, but they're kind of involved. So yeah, you talk Hollywood, this isn't Hollywood. This is like, this is what you're getting out of that ranch. You know?
Yeah. I think let's maybe talk a little bit about packaging and how that was all done, because
that was huge in that project because, you know, how do you bring all those together to sell essentially an entire valley through BC, you know?
Yeah.
So
maybe Roy, you want to touch on that because it is a different scenario.
Oh, totally. You know, and it's more key probably than we thought when we started, you know, 9 years ago type deal. Again, and this is maybe a bad analogy, but you know, I always say if you got a Dodge Ram truck and a livestock trailer and a Harley in the back and a goat and a roping horse in the trailer, you probably wouldn't sell them all together, right?
Not to the same buyer.
You know, but somebody might want them all. And, you know, that's where we get sometimes with farms or ranches. Sometimes there's really two ranches there. Yeah. You know, in this case, there sort of was two, but the way we did it, we sort of saw the merit in the assemblage and the lift. Especially with cattle prices now. Mm-hmm. But we'll really drill down there on how do we sell less. And this morning I just got off the phone with a guy in southern Alberta. And, you know, he's got a section here and then a half over there, and got talking to him, but a transmission line down the middle of the section. Normally we'd try and maybe sell that section as two halves. But the transmission line sort of straddles and there's revenue in that.
Right.
The half's a ways away, and the way that's got to be farmed is one. So we just got two parcels there. Yeah. But you know, we'll try and drill down and maybe get 3 or 4 out of that, but then we have our on block, and we may well have, as Mike knows, but this is important when he goes to shoot as well.
Right.
He's got to know sort of what the packaging is to get it right. So, you know, it's not, we sold 53 quarters in Saskatchewan near Kindersley a few years ago, and we had, I think, 2 or 3 on blocks because some land was on the Alberta side by Compier, Kindersley, some up north. Well, you're not going to have one buyer for those, and not generally. And so the key to monetizing is not to put it in one grab bag because you're going to get hurt bad.
Right.
And that's kind of what we saw happening. You know, the reason it was packaged as one by realtors often is the farmer rancher would say, I don't want to be left with one shoe or one rubber boot. Yeah. You got to get the job done. So I need the same. I don't want all my equipment here to farm 4 quarters if I've got 18.
Right.
So they would just package it together to make sure it got done. We get it done on one day, but we still engage as many buyers as possible.
Yeah. The packaging, you're right. We have to wrap our heads around it when we're capturing it.
Yeah.
To understand, you know, how we're selling it and how is that going to appeal to the neighbor, how far can they come to make it enticing? Are they going to travel 10 miles down the road to farm that? Or, is it just a single quarter that maybe a neighbor or, someone in close proximity would really be attracted to? And how we shoot that and how we market it, how we package it, all the marketing material that goes along with it is, it's pretty cool to see. It's such a cool concept. I can't say it enough that like the hybrid of CLH taking all the best parts of how farmland was sold for the last however many years in Canada is like now improved because all those good positive elements are brought together into CLHbid.
Well, and with that specific project too, I mean, there was multiple owners, there was options on it as well. There was all sorts of considerations. It's not a cookie cutter thing. It's a complex process, right? So
yeah, often in a case like that, there was hard options on the assets. So the high bidder had the option then to take hay, cattle, equipment at a set price, and they knew that price ahead of time. So they knew if they were high, then what their strike was on those options, right?
Yeah.
And if they didn't want them, some people would like to change out the yellow for green iron or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I saw a sign at a farm the other day east of Fort Saskatchewan, and it said, "Tractors are like watermelons. Keep the throw away the green and keep the red." And so everybody's we don't force the equipment or hay or whatever with a farm, but we'll often do that as just a straight option. We did that in that case.
Yeah, and in that case they get like a turnkey ranch, if they want it. It's just as it was working, it's working now with the cattle, with the hay, like you're saying, the equipment, everything. You could literally turn in, like walk in there the next day and just operate it like it has been, which is advantageous for a lot of buyers.
Manager, right? In
yeah.
that case?
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the manager wanted to say too. So it's such a good turnkey operation just to keep operating like that.
Well, I don't know how much we touch on the ranch manager there, but there was a lot of history there, right? And so that was part of the story too, was capturing that history.
That's been weaving its way through this whole podcast. It's the history, right?
Yeah.
Doing it justice. Like, how do you show that? How do you make sure your grandfather or great grandfather are going to be happy with the decision you're making? Maybe you're a professional now, you went to school or whatever and moved to a big center and you still have some farmland in your name, and it's just like, well, you want to do them right, You do. Grandparents lived their whole life there, in some cases forged rivers to get here and, broke the land themselves and, created that sense of community around them. Roy knows all about that because we're sitting on this centennial farm of his. Was it your grandfather that established this one?
Yeah, totally.
So, I mean, how do you do that, would you make them proud by making this decision and choosing CLHbid? And I think that's what we keep coming back to, is just like, it doesn't matter if you're talking to part of the sales team or just nickel answering the phone, anyone really at the team, but we all get it. We're all putting our best foot forward. So,
well, I mean, and there's a really powerful line, right? We ended up using it in our marketing. So we're sitting at the kitchen table having that conversation with Brian and the ownership, and he said, "This is my home," right?
Yeah.
And that was just still, he lived in that valley his entire life, and that became a part of the marketing itself. It was just really interesting.
Yeah, he spoke as if he was a custodian for that valley.
Yeah,
and it came down from his grandparents.
Yeah,
and that's cool to hear, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. Mike, in terms of technology, I think we're maybe nearing the end of this podcast here, but how do you see that changing in the future? Is there anything, AI, technology, where do you kind of see things moving in the future?
Yeah, I think, AI's got to be on everyone's radar today. It's such a buzzword right now, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you have to be aware of it. Autonomous tractors now, it's touching everyone, right?
For sure.
So we have to be aware of it, but I think there's such a genuine feel to still an operator going out there, understanding that farm, telling that story with boots on the ground, rather than just plugging in, okay, it's located here, here's the LSD on it, or whatever, and then just allowing AI to come up with a story. It's to me, it doesn't feel the same, and I don't think we're doing our sellers a service if we go that route. Yeah. So we're aware of it, but even my drones are autonomous. I can set waypoints in there and allow them to do it, but I don't think I ever have. I don't think I ever have. It's always hands on the joystick. Yeah. You're controlling that. You're telling the story. You're taking the audience through that and really showing off that farm at its best foot. So, but in saying that, we are aware of what potentially other countries are doing or other regions. Like, what's Europe doing to sell farmland? What's the States doing? Are they setting anything different than what we're doing? We're always like trying to I laugh a little bit, but I'll send videos out and like, here's our kind of our best for 2024. But like, the whole team, like, be aware if there's anything else coming down the pipe that you guys see. And it doesn't have to be in egg farm sales or anything like that. It could be like any sort of cinematography. What are you guys seeing? And we want to stay sharp on the front forward edge of that. And I think we've seen ourselves, I'd like to think, as a leader in that space since we've incepted in day one.
Oh, definitely.
I agree.
But we want to be there. And we're not just going to sit on our heels and say like, okay, we're happy with the drones we have or what we're doing or how we're doing it. It's if a potential seller came to us and said like, we want to hit this region hard, we've got ties into this industry or something like that, make us a production that talks to them well, we're all ears, and hopefully, they're aware of us because of what we're doing well,
Yeah, that's a good point, Mike. Everything that we do is done in a custom way. It's very strategic. Every sale is unique, right? Yeah, exactly. And so we approach that and we look at, okay, who are we trying to reach and which geographic regions, and that filters out into everything that we do in terms of our marketing, right?
Yeah, you talk about like, okay, there's a lot to think about when you go to drone. Sure, the weather, sure, the time of year, sure, meeting up with the client, getting the right mapping, for instance. And you can't, overstate how powerful our team is, whether it's Grace or Shannon working on the maps in the back end. When we get there, we know exactly the outlines of what we're packaging, how we're packaging it, and all that's provided for us. It's like, that's like a huge game changer for us to have all that already done. Yeah. But to get out there, it's bespoke. It's one-off. Mm-hmm. That farm will be showcased in a one-off manner that hasn't been done before through our system or anyone else. And Roy talks about other sales that have been, out there on the market before we get there. And then it's just such a game changer when we're able to like really show the world what that farm is.
When I started, it was basically Ali and I and Mike, basically the three of us with this idea. But to get stills, when Farm would call, first of all, I had a cartographer who I would pay 2-3 days later to get me an image.
Wow.
With our team now, generally, if we ask our team for images, I would say within the hour, we got all kind of imagery right away.
Yeah.
But I mean, we didn't know even where to access all that now, but we've got that all in-house now. Yeah. It's a total game changer.
Yeah, we talk about the different versions of signs and refining that. Well, it's refining, we're using your mapping, and a lot of the time we're developing that. How do you develop the website? Why is it so reliable? Well, that's not a plugin. Like, our videos aren't a plugin. That website format isn't a plugin. That's all in-house. We've got tech guys that are world-class working on that. Yeah. And it doesn't matter if you point a finger at any area of this company. It's just like that. We definitely, if we're not already world-class or you're setting precedents in that industry, it's just that we want to be there. So
that's right.
And you just can't cheat there. On our on-block, with those clocks running down to the second, and people bidding different provinces and that, there you got to be on the money. If you're out 2 seconds, somebody could get stuck with $2-3 million worth of land they don't want. They either want it all or none. Yeah, and you got to deliver. And so there's no plugins from that point of view. Like if it's close. We always say mediocrity doesn't work, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's not acceptable. Yeah. So from that point of view, we brought it in-house and we got to be on the money.
Yeah, we've seen such an advancement in drones like we keep talking about. I think a lot of people are listening to this. Get back to the drones. We're talking about drones, but it's just like the technology wouldn't work either. You're talking about like milliseconds that we're able to tell when bids come in and see that from the back end. And it's just like, again, technology, thankfully, whether you're on LTE or 5G on your phone or you're bidding from international on a laptop or desktop or whatever else, like you have to have that confidence in that system. And again, it comes back to technology being advanced. And that's not through AI. That's not just taking the easy road out. It's been a lot of trial and errors and a lot of working hard and earning that trust through the ag community to say like, that thing does work. It's, whether I'm on my phone or whatever, it's consistent, looks the same, operates the same. And down to the millisecond, you're bidding and receiving those bids and feeling it. And then the way I just have to go on a tangent for a second because we have been involved in the website. You have to be. It's a website-based company. Yeah. So I've been fortunate to be involved in the website from day one, and to see that vision that Roy had is probably understated. He's pretty modest on this front, but like to see how that should work. And again, like be able to refine it, not just say like, no, that's how we're doing it and whatever, but like seeing how cattle operations work. And that's where universal close comes from, to allow all parcels open at the same time, then closing. The dynamic close was such a unique thing for me too, to see like how it just keeps extending. And it's just, why does that operate that way? To just ensure fairness and open transparency to everyone. Like if you want to buy a piece of land, there shouldn't be games. Like there shouldn't be things happening behind the scenes. It should just be open and transparent and allow you fair opportunity at it. And again, it comes back to the marketing that we provide or the droning that we do, but it's just like allowing fair opportunity for everyone to a chance at that land. Yeah.
And I think where I would see AI playing a bit of a role, Mike, is just generative search, right? So now things like Google has changed so much in the way that they operate. So now when you search for things, AI is going to spit out a response for you, and it'll cite the sources for you. But now people are having to work a little less hard to get that information, right? Yeah. ChatGPT now has ChatGPT search, so now they're providing real-time web results. Yeah. So those are the kinds of things that like we're not going to use AI for what we're doing, but in terms of maybe how our potential sellers and buyers are searching the web, that's going to change. And I think that's relevant here because we're going to continue to stay on the cutting edge for our clients through time. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's AI or drones or photography, cinematography, but we're all over it, right? And we love that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't tell Amos he's going to have a self-driving Peterbilt go down and put up the signs in Saskatchewan for him. He's not going to get off that easy.
No chance. Maybe before we take off here, guys, give me maybe one story between the two of you. Like what's one thing that stuck out to the two of you through working together for 8 or 9 years?
This is going to have to be a whole nother podcast in itself.
It could be, but I want to hear some juicy stories here.
That story in Sweetgrass with Richard was pretty funny. Like I still remember that. It was yesterday. I'll sell my land if you drive the pickup home. And I looked at it. I just looked at Roy. I just said, I've been telling you this for years.
It sold well, and he came to the Ponoka Stampede as a guest then. Yeah. And we had him. Corey Stark, involved in our marketing, has large rain gauges. Yeah. And Richard was so happy they put tequila, about 4 inches of tequila in the rain gauge, and he drank it out of the rain gauge. So,
There's a picture of that.
Yeah. He's
still to this day.
Just a real beautiful family. Bianchi is their last name.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned, early days of road tripping through some areas south of Medicine Hat there and seeing the fall colors and getting to visit these and really learn about the local regions of farmland has been, it's been huge for me. It's so much fun. And I can't thank you enough for having me on.
Spending a night in the motorhome. I was in one end, you were in the other, but it rocked all night in that wind down there. Couldn't live down there. This rancher there said, come to see us in the Cypress Hills just south. And it was directions were go over this hill and then you'll see a big Canadian flag straight out. Yeah. And it was like, what happens if the flag's not straight out? It will be.
It will be.
And we got there and the flag was straight out. And
the wind was just
howling. It must have been 80 mile an hour wind all night. But they had us in family and had a beautiful supper. And nice. It's just fun stuff like that, right? Yeah. Just, respecting their ranch and being part of their family for a bit.
And it comes back to the CEO being willing to hop in a motorhome and taking a huge tour like that. I think we visited, 3 or 4 farms in southern Alberta, and maybe CLHbid looks a little bit different formatted this day and age, but we're still willing to hop in a pickup or go meet farmers anywhere in Western Canada, and it's huge to be able to do that. I can't say it enough at how fun it is. It's not hanging out of a helicopter chasing a jet boat doing 160 miles an hour, or like what I'm maybe better known for of like the 509 films that I produce and things like that in the winter months. But it's such a genuine challenge to say like you have like a snowmobiler going off of a 120-foot cliff is one thing. You do not want to hit, forget to hit the record button. You want to capture that and do it justice. But at the same point, you can't approach sale day with a 110-year-old farm and know in the back of your mind you didn't do everything you could to try and, showcase it to the world. And I think that's the fun challenge that I see with CLH all the time, is just like getting to meet these cool people and interesting places throughout Western Canada and getting to see the landscape, but just like approaching that challenge and saying like, let's put our best foot forward.
Yeah. You sound like you've failed to hit the record button one time with the guy going over 120-foot jump, did you?
I still remain all good with all the pro athletes out there. We're all very friendly.
Oh, okay.
So I haven't, but
Okay.
I have heard stories, and my God, I would not.
I wouldn't want to be that guy for getting hit
No.
record.
No.
Not at all.
The athletes still want me to film them, so I must be doing something right.
Okay. All right. Any parting words, guys? Or how
No,
are we
I
feeling
just
here?
want to thank Roy, Bridget,
Yes.
Devon. It's been a pleasure working with you for the past couple of years. I'm so excited to see where CLHbid's going to go in the future, because I truly believe this thing's such a cool hybrid of everything good in selling farmland. And
Absolutely.
if I had family selling a ranch or a farm, I'd put 100% trust in CLH, because it's just everything good about it. It comes, and they get a really cool video at the end of the day.
Yeah.
No.
To remember the ranch by.
Yeah.
We
If
got
nothing
the
else.
right people at the right time. It's fun.
It's been incredible. Yeah, no, same to you, Mike. It's been great working with you for the past couple of years here. And Roy, can't thank you enough for everything you've done for me, and Bridget as well. It
Works
just,
two ways, sorry, Devon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks very much.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, guys. This has been another episode of the Farmland Exchange podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard here today, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. This will be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. Please follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere else you can find us. So give us a follow. And of course, this wouldn't be a podcast without a bit of shameless promotion. So if you are interested in selling farmland, please give us a call. Check out our website, CLHbid.com. All of our contact information is there. Or send us a quick email, info@CLHbid.com. We'd be honored to have a conversation. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been a positive exchange for you. Take care.